Okay, so I'm filming this back to back with my Hereditary review because after I get my anger out and my infuriation with the current state of blockbuster film, at least the strong majority of it, once I release that, I feel like I'll be ready to talk about the greatness that is Hereditary, but for now I get to talk to you about the bombshell that is Ocean's 8, which is the fourth film in the Ocean's franchise. For those of you who follow me on Letterboxd, I posted a very quick review coming out of this movie that said, this is quite possibly one of the worst movie experiences I've ever had. And I stand by that wholeheartedly. I saw this movie with two friends, one of which fell asleep about 20 minutes in after leaning over to me and saying, I don't know what's happening right now, and the other desperately tried to fall asleep but couldn't and had to sit through this movie with me. That's where we were at in terms of watching this thing. I was angry the entire time watching this movie. I take that back. I was angry after the first 20 minutes of this movie. If I have to point to one little shining light of this movie, it's the first 20 minutes. Sandra Bullock and Cate Blanchett are the best performances in this movie, but they're still not that great. They're fine. It's not necessarily their fault, but, like, they're just okay. They're very kind of flat, and, I mean, like, they actually can deliver lines of dialogue, so I have to give them credit on that, amongst the other performers who, don't worry, I'll get to in a little bit. And there's one cool sequence where Sandra Bullock shoplifts, and it was neat, and it kind of got me into it. And then they bring in the other crew, and the movie tanks for innumerable amounts of reasons. Now, I'm going to be comparing this movie to Ocean's 11 a lot, the 2001 Steven Soderbergh film, which is, in my opinion, one of the best remakes ever made. And it is one of my favorite movies of all time, which is one of the reasons I was strongly against this movie being made. Not because it stars all women, because Ocean's 11 was done, and then they did two sequels, and those sequels both sucked. So I don't know whose idea it was to pick this franchise up again after the two attempts of making it again did not work, but alas, here we are. A lot of you will be saying it is unfair to compare this movie to Ocean's 11. I've gotten that a lot in the past couple days. No, I strongly disagree. I think comparing bad movies to good movies is sort of the foundation of film review, and saying this is what you need to improve, this is what you need to do better in order to reach this level of greatness in film, which Ocean's 11 does reach, especially when you're a part of that same franchise and you have an expectation to live up to. Yeah, I'm going to compare this movie to Ocean's 11, and I'm going to carefully explain to you why that movie works and why this movie doesn't work at all. The first reason being the director. They decided in this all-female cast film, which I have no problem with, please don't even get me started on this shit, they decided to take this all-female cast and, just like Ghostbusters did, have it be directed by a male. Not just a male, Gary Ross, which is the most white male-sounding name I think I've ever heard in my entire life. To my knowledge, he used to direct some good movies. I know he did Seabiscuit back in, like, 2003, which I've heard is good. But recently, our friend hasn't been seeing much success in terms of critical acclaim with his films. In 2016, he made Free State of Jones, which was sort of Matthew McConaughey's start to, like, declining back to the point where, like, he had hit this peak for, like, a year, and we were all going, oh shit, he's back, and then he made that, and it was just kind of back to shit. And he also made The Hunger Games, which I despise with all of my heart. I hate all four of those movies. I find almost no joy in any of those. Fun little fact, the only movie I've ever walked out of is Mockingjay Part 1. But that's probably a story for another time. So, once I heard that his name was attached to this movie, I already wasn't looking forward to it, because he's pretty incompetent when it comes to making movies. You can tell that he doesn't really know what he's doing. Like with The Hunger Games, the guy probably Googled how to make an action movie intense, and clicked the first link, and it said shake the camera, so he told the cinematographer of The Hunger Games to snort a line of cocaine before they shot the cornucopia scene, and sure enough, you can't see anything. He almost meets the exact opposite problem with that in this movie, in that every little thing is flat. There is nothing vibrant about this movie. There is nothing aesthetically pleasing about this movie. There is nothing that makes it special or sets it aside from any number of other heist movies or action movies or comedy movies I've seen. Like, even I think about a movie from earlier this year, Den of Thieves, which had a solid foundation, but everything on top of it is just flat, and it's boring, and it's not interesting to look at. It's not appealing to the eye or to the audience for any reason. This movie faces that same problem. The cinematography is very just two-shot. Over-the-shoulder shot. Okay, pan left, pan right. And it's just, there's nothing poppy about it. And this is a fun heist movie. That's what it's supposed to be. That's what it's setting out to be. And when you're setting out to be that, the first thing that you should be considering doing is that. That's why Ocean's 11 works. That is one of the three, in my opinion, biggest reasons that movie works. It is because it is very vibrant, and the lighting is very good, and the music is great, and it complements what you're seeing, and the cinematography is great, and the production design is great. The entire thing feels like Vegas. Everything else is centered around, or is built around that central point of Las Vegas. That's the entire point of the movie, is they want you to have this feeling like that. They want you to feel like you're in the middle of a casino, so that everything feels that much more cool. It's what makes that movie unique. This movie completely lacks anything that makes it unique. It doesn't have any of that music. It's got like rap music in it, and it reminded me a lot of the Suicide Squad soundtrack, where they just pulled songs and threw them in the movie just because, fuck it, we gotta sell a soundtrack. You know, and the editor, I'll give credit because they were trying to make like transitions interesting. They were very similar, like wipes and stuff, to what Ocean's 11 did, but the editor had no real good footage to work with or to make that work, so that never translates well. It just feels inconsistent and out of place. There is no set tone. It was like Gary Ross got into post-production and he had gathered all this boring shit and he told the editor, alright, make it interesting, and the editor was like, excuse me, that's not entirely how my job works. It's a two-way street. You have to do your part as well. And as a result of all of that, you never find yourself invested into the movie. You never find yourself interested. I never cared about any of these characters because they're so piss-poor written and the movie is so piss-poorly paced that as they're all introduced in like the 30 to 45 minutes, that feels like a fucking eternity because it's all that's happening and the scenes aren't interesting. They're just consistently dialogue-based scenes where Debbie Ocean is like, you want to do this? You want to do this with me? You want to be a part of this? Ocean's 11 didn't do that. They just showed all of them briefly in their own element, and then they all gathered together as a unit, so you didn't have to see the same conversation happen 11 different times. They managed to find a way to make that work and make it all snappy and interesting, like the style of the movie was. But you never find yourself interested in these characters, partly because they are all copies of the first one. I mean, Cate Blanchett is Brad Pitt. Awkwafina is trying to be Matt Damon. Rihanna is the one hacker guy. Helena Bonham Carter is Ruben. Like, at their foundation, these characters are all just taken from Ocean's 11, and it's very infuriating. The only original character is Sarah Paulson, because they didn't have a female group member in Ocean's 11. Julia Roberts wasn't in the group, and so they didn't have someone who was like, okay, I gotta call my kids, and I gotta be a mom really quick. And like, that was at least kind of interesting when they had Sarah Paulson doing that, but it also came across as annoying because the dialogue was so bad. Side note, by the way, the entire time during the heist, she has her hand on her fucking ear like this. Like, they spend 20 minutes in this movie talking about security cameras and, like, you gotta stay in the blind spots, you gotta stay in the blind spots, and they, like, even set up blind spots. You're telling me not one camera in the Met Gala saw Sarah Paulson with her hand on her ear like this? There are two scenes in two different James Bond movies where Daniel Craig tells his partner to take his fucking hand off their ear, or her hand off their ear, and one of them results in the mission basically going completely to shit.
Stop touching your ear.
Sorry? Put your hand down.
Take your hand off your ear. Just talk. I understand what you're doing. You're talking into an earpiece. Just talk. I'm so tired of letting filmmakers get away with little shit like that. Like, we shouldn't be settling for mediocrity like that anymore. But the characters aren't interesting, and as a result of that, you have all these uninteresting characters in this uninteresting looking movie, in this uninteresting feeling movie, and then you hit the heist, and you're supposed to feel suspense. But you don't. A, because it's edited and shot and directed and written poorly, and B, because you don't care about any of these characters. And so there's no stakes. You're not like, oh man, I hope they get away with it, or man, I really hope they don't get caught. I was indifferent. I was like, if they get caught, I get to go home early. You know, I can leave. I can get in my car and drive home. So maybe I want them to get caught, you know? But the other reason the heist is not interesting, and this is, I'm bringing back Ocean's 11 as to why that movie works over this one, because half of these characters are completely fucking useless when the heist rolls around. They are useless. They have nothing to do. At one point in the heist, they cut to Mindy Kaling, and it's about 20 minutes into the heist, and it's the first time you see her, and you have forgotten completely that she is in this movie. It literally hit me like that, like fucking that, and I was like, oh my god, Mindy Kaling is still in this movie. Same thing with Helena Bonham Carter. She does nothing. Nothing in the entire heist. Ocean's 11 is so cool because there are 11 cast members that are all simultaneously doing something that A, only they can do, and B, is completely pertinent to the success of the heist. They all have to be there. And the heist does not work without each of them doing their thing. You never forget that any of them are a part of this movie. You never forget about who their characters are, because they're always pivotal. They are always doing something. They're always being cut back to. You never feel like anyone is being left out. This movie centers on like 3 characters of the 8, and then every now and then you get to see some of the other ones do one job, and then they're done. I don't even know what Cate Blanchett does in this movie. I don't have a clue. I literally, like, if you can go see this movie, and other than, like, kind of pre-plan with Debbie Ocean, who does that whole thing anyway, and you can tell me what her job was, I would be fascinated to know. Or, if you can see this movie once and not go on the IMDb page and tell me what their character names were, I would also be fascinated to know, because I don't know any of them. I don't know Mindy Kaling's name. I don't know Awkwafina's name. I know Rihanna's because it's ridiculous, and that 9-ball line is my favorite line in the entire movie because of how bad it is.
What's your name? 9-ball. What's your real name? 8-ball.
8-ball. But that's the other reason that Ocean's 11 works over this movie. Writing. Ocean's 11 is not just great because of its strong direction, it is great because the script is great. The lines are snippy like this. It almost feels like Sorkin writing. One of my favorite scenes in that entire movie has nothing to do with the heist. It's just a conversation scene between George Clooney and Julia Roberts in a restaurant, and it's so well written, and the dialogue is so good, and the characters come out so well, and the performances are so good.
You're a thief and a liar.
I only lied about being a thief. I don't do that anymore.
Steal.
Lie.
I'm with someone now who doesn't have to make that kind of distinction.
No, he's very clear on both.
You know what your problem is?
I only have one.
You've met too many people like you.
The writing in that movie is so great, and in this one it's so cringy and bad and amateur and screenwriting 101. There was a minute-long scene where Awkwafina shows Mindy Kaling how to use Tinder, and you're like, why? That shit is all over the place in this movie. There's so much fluff and padding to make this movie feel longer than it really should be. It feels like 4 hours, and the movie's only an hour and 50 minutes long. They just had to make it look like it was a real movie. They had to put these scenes in so that when people looked at the runtime, they were like, oh, an hour and 50 minutes, that's usually how long movies are. This looks like a real movie to go and see. Like, you're so full of shit. These filmmakers are so full of shit, and then you get to the performances, and the performances are just so magnificent. They're just so good. Let's cast Awkwafina. She's miserable. Rihanna is miserable. Stop casting Rihanna in movies. She's not an actress.
Mahalo, mother.
She's a great singer. She's not an actress. Did you see Battleship? She is not an actress. Stop making her one. Just stop. It's so pointless. Who else is it? Helena Bonham Carter is awful in this movie. Anne Hathaway is awful in this movie. My other biggest problem is that this movie is ultimately kind of copying Ocean's 11. There is a lot of plot point stuff that's very reminiscent of Ocean's 11 that you get from the first trailer. The first scene of this movie is the same as the first scene of Ocean's 11. There's this plot point in this movie where Debbie Ocean, her boyfriend set her up or something, or like framed her, so she's trying to frame him for this heist. And there's an entire scene where Cate Blanchett pulls Debbie Ocean out of the warehouse and says, you can't pull a job within a job, and if you do this, I'm walking right now. And there's a scene in Ocean's 11 that it's that, like that's the scene. That's the same thing. Like, you can't do that and then expect me not to compare this to Ocean's 11. Like, fuck you. I'm gonna compare it to the better movie that it's copying anyway. Fuck's sake. I don't even know what else I have to say, but I feel like I had other shit to say. Oh, let me do a spoiler thing really quick. This is my last thing. This is spoiler alert. If you care, great. Whatever. See it. Don't go see Hereditary. Don't see a great film. Possibly the best of the year. At the end of this movie, by the way, the last 25 minutes should be cut completely. The last 25 minutes of this movie should be completely removed. It is useless, and it's the worst part of the movie, and it needs to be gone. They send James Corden in as an insurance investigator, and it's like, get out. Fuck off. Anne Hathaway, at the very end, there's this scene, and they're all talking, and they're like, man, yeah, we got away with it. What an elaborate scheme this was. She's been planning this for 5 years. So good. And then Anne Hathaway barges in the doors. And you're like, oh my god. Has she been working with them the entire time? And no, it's worse. She goes, oh, I just picked up on what you were doing from the very start. So I just wanted to cut. So you're telling me this scheme is so elaborate that the police can't figure it out, that no one can figure this out. But Anne Hathaway, the dopey, dumb actress character, oh, she got it. She got it right from the start. No, that's just you trying to set up a sequel, because you know that if Anne Hathaway is on the poster for Ocean's 9, which I'm sure will happen eventually since people are seeing this movie, so she can be in it, and more people will see it, and it'll make more money. How is no one thinking about that? How does no one talk about that? That is such a blatant plot hole. The other thing is, one more, I swear, and I'll be done. Another big thing about Ocean's 11 that's so cool is there's constantly conflict that's popping up. There are constantly things going wrong that you have to see the characters work around, and that's really unique. Like when they fix the electricity problem that Don Cheadle was going to interrupt. Or when Yen breaks his wrist and he wraps it and it results in him getting caught in the door. They have to resolve these conflicts. That happens one time in this movie. They find out that you need this like special magnet to get the necklace off her fucking neck, and you're like, oh shit, well they're gonna have to figure this out. Rihanna calls her sister, who has not been in the movie. She's in this one scene, says, I can hook you up, gives him the magnet, and we move on, and that character is never seen again. This is the most piss-poor put-together film I've seen all year. It's close to the quality of A Wrinkle in Time. I hated this movie. I hated it. I would not recommend it for my life. You need to see anything else. Please go see Hereditary. Review coming soon. I will talk in depth about why that movie is excellent. I'm beyond words as to how much I hated this movie. Go watch Ocean's 11. It's better. It's just better. Good fucking lord. I don't even know what to fucking do anymore.